Breaker's transformation. Prologue. This all began when I was just 6 years old. My father was executed by false claims of being a spy for Griffinshire, and my mother was murdered and raped soon after. This left me as the only survivor in the family. Well, my pet dire wolves and their kids escaped alongside me. We are outcasts now, and have to scavenge food and water by ourselves. Thanks to Duke Hanardier and Duke Gonalon. I will have my revenge, and I will absolutely avenge my parents, even if it kills me. My wolves, Kana, Rena, Rui, Calvin, Amy, and Zeus all sat down around me and howled to the moon, showing the kingdom of Griffinshire that soon they will fall to rubble and burn to ashes by them and Breaker. Chapter 1. After Breaker took one glance at the kingdom below, he sighed and turned around to become stronger than the entire army that supported the tyrant king, and to avenge his murdered family. Come on guys, we are leaving now, stay close to me and don't get lost. The pack of dire wolves followed Breaker into the forest and licked his ankles, showing him that they will follow him anywhere and help him no matter what. After entering the forest, Breaker noticed that Rui was growling at the tree next to them. Thinking that it was probably a squirrel, Breaker continued to walk. But Rui was getting more and more aggressive. So Breaker walked beside her and said, all right Rui. Show yourself. Before I cut down this tree and cut you down. A boy jumped down and said, I'm so scared. Not. So Breaker, they drove you out of the kingdom, didn't they? Chapter 2. Breaker tilted his head and said, who the heck are you? And how do you know my name? Then he pulled out his sword and the person smirked, saying, some call me the magician's oracle, but I prefer to be called Silver. I will tell this much, I helped your father show innocence in the court a year ago, shame he died though. He was an interesting man, never before have I seen anyone like him. Breaker pointed his sword the Silver and said, listen here Silver. You have 5 seconds to tell me why you're here. If you don't, I will slice you to tiny pieces. Rui, Amy, and the other wolves growled at him as a warning that Silver better listen. But Silver smiled and said, as Rathetsio Synthos. Breaker's eyes were blinded, but he felt his head and chest, noticing that he was now a female. His vision returns and he said, Silver, what did you do to me? Silver smiled and kissed Breaker's cheek and said, I gave you power, but you must learn to tame it, and increase it a lot. Once your journey is completed, you will return to your male form, but you will lose most of the power you have gained. Chapter 3. And that is how I got turned into a long, silver-haired, purple-eyed, short girl. And my male side will never return, that I heard while spying on the oracle. So now I have to cope with being a girl and start my life over, differently. Man, this sucks. I guess it's time to call my colleague to do me a favor. Chapter 4. Hello. Hi Carla. I need your help, something happened to me and, I think you should see it for yourself, it's complicated. Sure thing. But why do you sound like a female? Wait. Did you meet the oracle? Just meet me in the heart of the forest, near the riverside at 1342, 1:42 p.m. Alright, fine. I'm on my way, just sit tight, be there in about 7 minutes. After Breaker took the shoes from her feet, and dipped her feet into the river and relaxed until. Chapter 5. Hi Breaker. Ah crap, not you. Old man Chris, why are you here? I've been exiled from Griffinshire, just go away. The old man stopped where he stood and said, you're not exiled, you're forced to flee from the king's tyranny. But I have something to give you, Here. I took a box from him and he left the area. What is this? I opened the box and found a small piece of paper that said, "You're known now as Sheila, welcome to your new life." The Oracle. Humph. Jerk. Hi Sheila, what can I do for you? Sheila turned her head and said, "Hi Carla, I'd rather not be called that name, so just call me, Weiss." Ripping the paper to tiny fragments, Weiss whistled and the wolves ran to her, sniffing and sitting next to her. Carla sat down and said, "I take it that you want me to help you start over and teach you how to do everything as I do, because you're a girl?" "Yes, that's right, and if you can't then I will call Shelby." Chapter 6. Whoa there pal. No need for that. I'll gladly help you. Just know that it'll be tough, and lots of effort will be involved. Sheila smiled and said, "Good, I am willing to work through it all, after all I'm a female now, and I have to start over anyways." She rubbed the back of her head and sarcastically laughed. Carla stopped me and said, "That's one thing that a girl shouldn't do, rub the head like that." I stopped and said, "Yes ma'am." From that day on, Sheila was learning from her colleague and eventually stopped as Carla came down with a deadly cancer. "Carla, will you be okay if I go shopping? It'll take just a few minutes." Carla pulled Sheila's head next to her and said, "I have little time left, take the gun from underneath the bed and shoot me, I been poisoned somewhere. I'd rather die by you than the poison." Sheila began to cry and said, I just can't do it." "You mean everything to me." Carla smiled and said, "Sheila, just do it, kill me, it's an order, not an option." Sheila knew whenever Carla talked like that, you haven't a choice to make. So she took out the gun, it was a silenced handgun, and loaded a bullet into the gun and said, "I'm sorry, Carla. It's because of me." Chapter 7. Carla smiled and said, "It's not your fault, I've done stuff that caused me to become an outlaw, and bounty hunters have been after me for months. Do not fret, just use everything I have taught you wisely. Now, pull the trigger Sheila." Sheila looked away and pulled the trigger. "I'm so sorry, Carla." She cried on Carla's dead body for 2 hours straight before saying, "Rest in peace, Carla. May the Maker accept you into the heavens. I thank you for everything." Sheila left the house and had lost all of her rational thoughts and loaded the gun's magazine with bullets and said, "I promise you. Revenge. I will kill the Oracle and the ones who started all this." She whistled, causing her dire wolves to appear in great size, tall enough to smash through the strongest of walls. After mounting on Rui, Sheila made her way to the Oracle, to kill him and hopefully return herself to a male once again. This better return me to normal. I hate being a female. Chapter 8. As she made her way through the forest, Sheila saw a boy and a girl sitting on tree stumps talking. But as the girl stood up and approached me, she said, You look perfect for us. We could use you for the rebellion against the king and his men. Will you join us?" Sheila stared and asked one dangerous question. "I have been forced from Griffinshire and just lost my mentor, who made me shoot her so she died properly in her eyes. What else do I have to lose?" The boy stood up and said, "Look beautiful, life sucks and we all suffer greatly. But that's what makes us stronger. If you need to know, the answer is simple. We all suffer great losses and those losses increases morality and shows us the path to follow for vengeance." Sheila stared and said, "Vengeance? Vengeance? Wait. My family. I swore vengeance. All right, I'll help you, under one condition. I get my vengeance and to kill the king and queen brutally, but you can help me make them suffer for their crimes. The two looked at each other and nodded before saying, "Deal." "But who are you?" Sheila smiled and said, "I'm cursed. I was once a boy and now I've been turned into a girl by the oracle. My name is Haku, remember it well." Chapter 9. After chatting a bit, Haku finally made his way to the oracle and dismounted Rui and kicked open the oracle's door and immediately grabbed his neck, lifting him high and yelled, "Change me back, now, or you die." But he just laughed and said, "For those that seek revenge, redemption is not allowed, nor forgiven. I will never change you back, boy." "King's orders." Haku yelled, "The king is tyrant, mad even. And here you are, taking the orders of a madman. What good are you?" "I'm going to kill him. But first, you must die. Now let's see what you have around here." He spotted a dagger and grabbed it, pointing it at the oracle's eyes and said, "What good is an oracle with no eyes? We shall start with them, yes?" Haku slowly carved out the oracle's eyes and placed them on a nearby table and asked, "Will you help me yet?" The oracle spit on Haku's face and Haku smiled, as he pointed the dagger at his fingers and said, "How about French fries, hum?" "Yes, I feel like getting French fries." Haku cut off the man's fingers, one by one and said, "How about now?" The oracle spat out blood and said, "Never. I work for only one, and that's the king." Licking the blood-covered dagger, Haku smiled and asked, "So you want more, do you? Okay. I'll keep going until you break, foolish mortal." Haku looked to see what is next, and spotted a stomach sample on a nearby desk and said, "Ah, the good old guts and gore. Let us begin." Haku stabbed the weak oracle's stomach, ripping it open until the guts and other stuff spilled out. Haku smiled and said, "Spaghetti, you know, I love spaghetti, so think I'll just take out your intestines and make some art from it, maybe I'll be so kind as to hang you with it." "What a honorable death, hum." The oracle finally broke and said, "Okay, fine. You win. I'll talk." Chapter 10. Haku threw him down and said, "Start talking or I kill you off." The oracle said, "The only way to fix yourself, is to kill the king and queen, but how are you alone possibly going to do that?" Haku smiled and said, "Whoever said I was alone? My dire wolves aren't all I have. I've gotten a rebellion." The oracle's eyeless face said, "They aren't rebels. Those are bounty hunters." Haku's face showed no emotion and she said, "I know, that is why I brought them into a trap. They're in combat with the royal army right now. Now that you've told me this, it's time I finished you off." Haku broke the oracle's neck and set fire to the building and headed to the castle of Griffinshire to kill the king and queen. Chapter 11. As she passed through the castle's secret entrance, Haku cocked the gun and kicked open the door in front of her and shot the 7 guards in the head before saying, "It is time to finish this." Haku tackled the king and shot his neck twice and turned to the queen and was stabbed in the stomach by her sword, but managed to keep it together and shot her head. Haku finally returned to her male form and sat next to a pillar, patches his wound and said, "Finally, Breaker's back. And I might as well head home to heal my injury." Breaker collapsed and landed face down, bleeding badly, but his dire wolves brought herbs and leaves to him, placed them on his stomach and surrounded him as the herbs did their work. After an hour of being unconscious, Breaker woke up and saw that his injury was gone and his dire wolves were sitting next to him. "Thanks guys, you saved my life, I'm really grateful." The wolves tackled him and licked him. showing that they were grateful themselves. Clash of Two Kings, The War of Avalon and Falcon Reach. Chapter 1, Declaration of War. After killing the king and queen, Breaker stood up and said, "At last, Carla can be in peace, and I will take rule over Griffinshire to bring peace to these lands, and any who dare to bring her to my lands will be hung." The dire wolves howled and sat beside Breaker. Suddenly a messenger rushed in and said, "Sire, the neighboring kingdom, Avalon, has declared war on Griffinshire." Breaker smiled and said, "Rally the troops, ready our weapons, and have the giants orcs ready for battle." "Who are we up against?" The soldier gulped and said, "Falcon Reach, sir." "We're at war against Falcon Reach." Chapter 2, Meeting and Knowing Each Other. Falcon Reach, huh? Well, don't just stand there, ready the troops. I have someone to meet. With that, Breaker exited the castle and walked towards the river and sat beside it. Looking at his reflection, he heard a voice across him say, "You're Breaker, right? I'm Sin, nice to meet ya." Breaker stood up and said, "Same here, I just took the throne from tyrant rulers." "What about you? What's your story?" "My sister killed our parents and eventually fell in love with me. Then we fought our way through hell and ended up ruling Falcon Reach. I came to the river to calm my mind and ready myself for our great war. I'm sure you're here for the same reason, hum." Breaker put on his boots and said, "Why did you declare war?" "Why?" Sin smiled and said, "One of the 7 cardinal sins of mankind, wrath. My name is Sin for a reason, you know. Besides, I have a feeling that this war will be quite interesting. Now, Breaker, what is your story?" Breaker blushed and said, "I was cursed. Turned into a girl and lost everything precious to me, so I killed the oracle that cursed me and recently claimed the throne for myself." Chapter 3, Awakening the God of Destruction. Sin nodded and said, "What kinda curse?" Breaker smirked and replied, "He turned me into a girl." Sin laughed and said, "That is hilarious. But you had to have learned to cope with it, so how did you?" Breaker was silent as he glared at Sin with empty eyes. "Don't pry. You will only reveal the one thing that nobody can control." Sin smirked and replied, "I'm not human, I'm a were-dragon." "Show me what you are made of, Breaker." Breaker's body began to change. Black wings formed from his back, his eyes began to constantly bleed, claws appeared from his fingertips, his purple hair turned white, and 9 fox-like tails tore from his back, and he said, I'm the god of destruction. And you have awakened me from my slumber, Sin. You best have a good reason for it." Sin fell to his back and said, I see now, what I've gotten myself into. This is bad." Chapter 4, The Battle of Two Kings. The knight nodded and said, "Yes, your majesty," and rushed to the 4th tower and waited for the chance to begin the offensive. Breaker stood up and walked through the drawbridge, golden sword in hand, and angelic armor on. He shouted, "In the name of peace, fight for those whom you wish to protect. Charge!" As the two armies clashed, swinging swords, and firing arrows, countless men fell to their knees, taking their last breath, and died. Both Sin and Breaker show their true forms and clashed heads and fists at each other, until Chapter 5, Ending. A goddess with long hair carrying 2 swords appeared on the middle of the battleground, causing the knights to stop fighting and kneel before her. She stabbed her swords in the ground and shouted, "In the name of the gods, stop this battle, now." Breaker looked at the girl and said, "I am a god. I do as I please." The girl pulled out one of her blades and said, "You are no god, not any more Etherean. Remember? You were thrown out of the heavens for the attempt of executing Lord Zeus." Breaker smirked and replied, "Scarlet, you are no different from me, yet you still enter the heavens, with the goal to kill all gods. Why would I stop?" Suddenly, Breaker spat out blood and looked at his heart, only to see that his chest had a hand sticking through it. Sin had ripped out his heart and smashed it. But Breaker wouldn't be defeated so easily. He did the same to Sin, and ripped off Sin's head, burning the crevice. Sin fell to his death and Scarlet approached Breaker, wielding both swords in her hands. Breaker followed her and stood face to face. Breaker's injury had been healed and Scarlet said, "Breaker, you are a fool. And I like that about you. Want to return home with me? To the heavens?" Breaker smiled and said, "Do you really want me to?" Scarlet smiled and hugged him saying, "It's been boring without you. Please, come back to me." Breaker hugged her and said, "Okay, I will." She smiled and the two ascended into the heavens one final time. Once human, now animal. Chapter 1, Like Mother Like Son. After swallowing the raw flesh and blood, I snapped back to reality and saw what I had done to my loved one and said, "No, I didn't. I can't. This is. It's not. No." Suddenly, I collapsed and heard the words in my mind say, "You are mine." It all begins today, revolution at its finest. I woke up on a hilltop and looked at the city below as it was burning and exploding, bit by bit. Ashes rose into the skies as the apocalypse of New York began. I found a broken piece of a mirror beside me and went to pick it up, but I had no hands. I had paws and claws. So I looked at myself in the broken shard and saw that I was a massive cat, with one glowing blue eye and a missing eye. Suddenly, I saw a bullet whiz past my nose, so I ran and ran as fast as I could until I was at a dead end. Water behind me and rebels in front. I did what you wouldn't think of doing. I attacked them, chewing out their throats and ripping out their eyes. After I got down to the last one, I tackled him and saw that it was one of my kids and said, "Daryl." He looked at me and said, "Mama. Is that you?" We looked at each other until. Chapter 2, Castaway. I was shot in the neck with a blow dart and collapsed instantly. I woke up chained down and saw that I was being dragged by my left leg and I groaned, "Daryl." I heard the voice from before say, "No, no, no, this won't do. Not at all. Must I do everything myself?" I felt an unexpected amount of energy rush through my body and the chains broke as the sky began to storm badly, causing the rebels to release me and run to shelter. You foolish rebels. You haven't any clue what resides in the woman, do you? They pulled out their guns and shot at me, but with an unusual speed, I dodged each bullet and was hit by a lightning bolt, causing my blue eye to glow brighter and gave me the power to use lightning at my own will. The rebels ran but each was hit by lightning bolts as they run. But as Daryl ran, I interrupted and regained consciousness and control. Running to him, I smiled and said, "I'm sorry dear, but I cannot stay with you, but I love you, my son." I ran into the woods and ran until my legs allowed no more. A cave. Must enter. Upon entering it, I saw a coyote sitting near the entrance, tilting its head before approaching me and said, "Who are you? And where you? Casted out from your home? You look like it. The look in your eye says that you need a place to stay. You can stay here with me. My name is Brandon. Chapter 3, Learning Bout Control. I said nothing and lie down, and asked, "You won't leave me, right? Brandon. One more gone and, I'll be forced to trust nobody. You won't betray me, will you?" Brandon walked towards me and said, "What about you? Will you betray me?" "Mother." I looked at him and said, "Gail." He smiled and said, "Yes ma'am, what happened to you? Where's Pops? And Daryl?" I cried and said, "I'm sorry but Pops is gone. And your brother is a member of the U.S. Marine Corps." Gal sat down and said, "I feared as much. Mother. Father was killed by you, was he not?" I looked at him and said, "He called me a monster, I killed him in blind rage, I'm sorry." Gail smiled and said, "Mama. There's a way to control both your forms and powers. Are you willing to do so?" I looked at him in surprise and said, "Yes. Yes I am, I want to have control." Gail turned around and said, "Very well. Follow me." I stood up and followed him to the back of the cave and we stopped at an inscription on the wall. He looked at me and said, "Once you read this transcription, you will be face to face with your demons. You'll be the only one to fight it. If you win, you will have tamed it and gained control. Good luck, Mother." Chapter 4, Facing My Demons. I chanted the words on the wall, I invoke tame and control of this curse and seek redemption of what I have done. Adante chaos as wrath. Everything went black and I was nose to nose with the demon that resides in me. "So, you're finally here, Cammy. Do you really think you stand a chance against me?" I stepped forward and said, "I could ask you the same question, Hollow." The demon smirked and replied, "Then let's figure out, just who's stronger. Shall we?" We put all of our skills to the test, but I, Cammy, am a master of martial arts. I pinned Hollow down on his back and he smiled saying, "Looking at you up close. You are beautiful, Cammy. You win. Control is yours, just don't go using it carelessly." Cammy was about to stand up but, Hollow kissed her and said, "Your husband bids farewell, now get out." I woke up and saw Gail watching me and he said, "Seems like you did it ma, you're human again. Just one thing though. Your animal ears, they're still up top your head, wear this hat when you are in public, okay?" Chapter 5, Final Message. I stayed with my son, Gail, until he was killed by a huntsman and I'm now all alone and am known as K9. Listen here and listen well, for this warning I give you: 1, enter these woods with any weapons, I will eat your throat and leave out for the vultures. And if you see me in human form, keep your mouth shut and fingers to yourself, for I won't hesitate to rid you from the world. Breaker's Transformation. Prologue. This all began when I was just 6 years old. My father was executed by false claims of being a spy for Griffinshire and my mother was murdered and raped soon after. This left me as the only survivor in the